Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin, wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, in the previous video we have explained to you how we use the laws of learning as well as conditioning in terms of how negative control affects our state of anxiety and depression. And in this video I'm going to talk about social change, how we use the laws of learning insofar as social change is concerned, and how we shape society. So in terms of human conditioning, we are societal and social animals. So in the 21st century and 22nd century beyond, there will be a tremendous shift and change, very absolute change in terms of the societal structure and also worldview of how we're going to manage, for example, aspects of extreme right-wingism, extreme politics of hate, and so on. So there are ways and means to it in which we can shape and mold our society towards something that is positive and good. And this is all boils down to psychology, how we use psychology as a basis and using the knowledge of psychology in terms of conditionings and laws of learning. So this is still on chapter 4. There's one subtopic on the laws of learning as a foundation of social change. I'll read what Professor Muhammad Mahdi Jenkins has written, and then I'll give you some explanation. The laws of learning as a foundation of social change. In some countries, the government keep people in a deprived and oppressed condition. The government maintains this control over the people by negative means. This is where they use negative control. Some of the oppressed people ask in a reasonable way to be granted some of their basic rights. The government ignore this quiet and reasonable request. The response of asking quietly and reasonably is not reinforced. Therefore, asking quietly and reasonably is not likely to occur again in the future. So people who are hungry, people who have, you go through history, whether in the China, the great kingdom of China, in which the peasant raised up and overthrew and killed their kings, right up to the French Revolution, the Tsar of Russia, so many. These people, they ignore the suffering of the common people. So they ask reasonably for food, for shelter, for something, but they were not given because the super duper kingdom and the corrupt officials surrounding them ignore all those things. So this is where, in the modern world, is also happening in a lot of third world countries, especially in Africa, in Asia, in all over the third world countries. You can see the political leaders are so corrupt. They are super duper rich, but the poor are hungry and not having any food. So they ask by reasonable ways for some good, but that was not forthcoming. So that, in terms of the law of learning, is negative reinforcement. That means they will not do it again. Some of the oppressed people now take up arms and fight valiantly against the government. So then they will take the armed struggle. That's what's happening in a lot of, after the Arab Spring, you can see there are a lot of armed struggle. Now it's still going on in Syria and in some parts of the world except in Tunisia. So this is where they fight valiantly against the government. However, the government cannot continue to ignore the oppressed people. The violent struggle becomes widespread, becomes a revolution, and the oppressed government is overthrown. So they overthrew the oppressed government by arms. All right, but what happened after that? The violent struggle became widespread and became a revolution, and the oppressed government is overthrown. The control now is in the hands of the people. The response of violent struggle has been powerfully reinforced. So in terms of law of learning, if you take up arms, you fight, you get a victory. If you fight, you get a victory. So that has been the mindset of the people, and that will create a cycle of violence. Revolution through violent struggle will be promoted as the best way, perhaps the only way to attain positive change in social transformation. Revolution through violence may bring about a positive social change in the short term only, but this social change will contain a fatal flaw. So any revolution through armed struggle will bring a fatal flaw. The seeds of negative control and violent action are spread throughout the new government and among the people. This seed will grow and overwhelm whatever positive social change had been obtained. This fervor for revolution through violent action could destroy the government, destroy the people, and even destroy the planet. So we must understand this, how this whole structure of the world now is based on nationalism. That means you have countries and they are not even globalization, but there will be some ways and means in which we can find ways to reduce, especially for example in the Congo, in the Sudan, in Syria, in many countries all over the world. There are this kind of situation because of the deprivation and the oppression of the people take up arms. But once they take up arms, they win, they're also going to lose out. For example, Nicaragua, now you have Daniel Ortega as the president. He was, before that, anti-government, violent force of the neo-socialist, Marxist type of thinking. Now he's a president, now he's oppressing the people, and the people now are fighting against him. So this whole cycle of violence is going to go on and on. So how do we look from the perspective of psychology and for Muslims to understand that the loss of learning in terms of violent revolution and violent takeover of any nationalistic government is not the way forward. It is the best way forward is to have social change through positive reinforcement. So what this is positive reinforcement? This is where we work towards having a culture of negotiating, even though it may take a longer time, through people's power, positive people's power, and telling the people how we can go about to reduce, for example, corruption, excessive social upheaval and so on, by taking the slow and steady path of social change based on the Islamic principles of compassion, mercy, justice, love, and so on. So that can be done, especially in the 21st century, especially in the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, in Syria, in Yemen, in Lebanon, even in Egypt, and Sudan, and so on. So this is where we must learn from the psychologies of the law of learning, of how we can then shape our society towards a peaceful society, that if we want to have a change should be through democratic processes of the masses being taught to live, to live in a way that is more fulfilling by helping one another to shape the country, to shape the nation in a way that is positive and will bring greater good. So social change is inevitable, especially in the 21st and 22nd century. You'll see a trend towards nationalization and globalization. These will be two forces will be fighting, and there will be a lot of upheaval, especially now with climate change. There will be a lot of, for example, climate refugees and so on. How we as human beings going to handle the 21st and 22nd century will then bring an outcome of whether we have a peaceful transition towards a very global, peaceful, wonderful human civilization, or in the 21st century there will be so much strife, so much suffering, so much killing that it will be unbearable. So we hope through these understandings of the laws of learning we can apply this to have positive worldview, positive psychology, and that's why we have this book, Positive Islamic Psychology, a transcendent model to achieve peace, happiness and success in the 21st century. This is where we try to address Muslim youth not to become violent, not to use violence as a means or an excuse to destroy their own country, because that will be futile. Whatever is the past is the past, whatever is the future, we have to nurture a wonderful society based on democratic principles, people's power, living in peace, living in justice, and striving for the best of this world and the best of the hereafter, inshallah.